A single mom waitress brings her 6-year-old son to work after having no one to watch him. Her rude billionaire boss, feared by everyone, does something so unexpected it leaves the entire restaurant speechless. Before we start, I must warn you. Viewers who don't subscribe often never find our content again. The algorithm is unforgiving that way. If you want to ensure we meet again, please like, comment, and follow our channel immediately. This might be your only chance to join our community. Now, let's get on with our tale. Emily Brooks tucked a strand of chestnut hair behind her ear as she adjusted the collar of her son's blue shirt. The employee break room of Morgan's Fine Dining wasn't exactly where she had planned to hide Jake today, but her babysitter's last-minute cancellation had left her with no other options. "Remember the rules, sweetie?" she whispered, crouching to meet his eyes. "Stay quiet, color in your books, and if anyone comes in, I hide in the supply closet," Jake finished, his solemn nod betraying a maturity beyond his 6 years. Emily's heart twisted. No child should be this adept at hiding, at making themselves invisible. But single motherhood on a waitress's salary didn't come with the luxury of choices. She kissed his forehead, inhaling his familiar scent of crayons and the apple shampoo she'd splurged on last week. 3 hours, then Maria takes over my shift. I promise we'll get ice cream after. Jake's face brightened. "With sprinkles?" "With extra sprinkles," she promised, forcing a smile despite the anxiety gnawing at her stomach. If Margaret caught Jake here again, Emily would lose her job. And jobs that accommodated her complex schedule were nearly impossible to find. The door swung open without warning, and Emily's heart plummeted as she rose to her feet. But it wasn't Margaret, the perpetually disapproving manager. It was worse. Ethan Morgan himself stood in the doorway, all 6 feet of imposing, immaculate tailoring and cold authority. His presence seemed to compress the air in the room, making it harder to breathe. At 32, he was already legendary in the restaurant industry, brilliantly successful and notoriously demanding, and he was staring directly at Jake. "Miss, Brooks," he said, his voice deceptively quiet. "Care to explain why there's a child in my employee break room?" Emily moved instinctively, positioning herself between her boss and her son. "Mr. Morgan, I can explain." "I certainly hope so." His steel gray eyes flicked between them, his expression unreadable. "My babysitter canceled last minute. I tried everyone I know, but... So you decided my restaurant was an appropriate daycare center?" The edge in his voice could have sliced through the tension hanging in the air. Emily lifted her chin. "No, sir. I decided feeding my son was an appropriate priority." A charged silence followed her words. She could feel Jake's small hand clutching the fabric of her uniform behind her. Ethan's jaw tightened as he stepped fully into the room, allowing the door to swing shut behind him. In the enclosed space, Emily became acutely aware of his cologne, something expensive with notes of sandalwood and citrus. "You're one of our best servers," he said finally. "Margaret speaks highly of your efficiency." This was unexpected. Emily blinked, uncertain how to respond to the abrupt shift. "Thank you, sir." "However," he continued, and her momentary relief evaporated, "this clearly violates health codes and company policy." "I understand. If you'll allow me to finish my shift, I won't—" "What's your name, young man?" Ethan interrupted, addressing Jake directly. Emily felt her son's grip tighten on her uniform. "Jake," he answered, his voice small but steady. To Emily's astonishment, Ethan crouched down to her son's eye level, his expensive suit pants touching the break room's linoleum floor. "Jake, how old are you?" "6, sir." A flicker of something, amusement, surprise, crossed Ethan's face. "Sir." "Very polite. Do you always hide in restaurant break rooms?" Jake shook his head. "Only when mom's babysitter gets sick." Ethan's gaze returned to Emily, who stood frozen, unable to predict what would come next. Termination seemed inevitable. "Miss Brooks, do you have a moment to speak privately?" Emily's stomach twisted. "Jake, honey, can you sit with your books for just a minute? I'll be right outside the door." Once in the hallway, Ethan closed the door and turned to her. His expression remained inscrutable, but there was a tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. How often does this happen? Almost never, Emily answered truthfully. I have a reliable sitter, but she has the flu. I called 13 people this morning before coming in. I cannot lose this job, Mr. Morgan. For a long moment, he studied her. Emily forced herself to meet his gaze, refusing to show the desperation clawing at her insides. There's an unused office on the 3rd floor, he said finally. It was meant to be a secondary accounting space, but we never staffed it. It has a couch and a desk. Emily stared at him, uncomprehending. Your son can stay there during your shifts when necessary. I'll have security escort him up. There's a tablet we use for inventory he can watch videos on. She couldn't have been more shocked if he'd sprouted wings. You're not firing me? A hint of something that might have been a smile touched the corner of his mouth. Not today, Miss Brooks, but I expect exceptional service to compensate for this accommodation. Of course, thank you. I don't know what to say. Say you'll be on the floor in 5 minutes. Table 7 is a party of investors I'm trying to impress. With that, he turned and strode away, leaving Emily staring after him in disbelief. 3 weeks later, Emily balanced a tray of champagne flutes as she navigated through the crowded private dining room. Morgan's was hosting a charity gala, and every server had been drafted for the all-hands-on-deck event. She'd seen little of Ethan since the break-room incident, though Jake had become oddly attached to the 3rd-floor office. Apparently, Ethan had stopped by several times, bringing puzzles and math workbooks that Jake adored. The revelation that her strict, seemingly heartless boss had a soft spot for children, or at least for her child, was something Emily was still processing. Champagne, sir? She offered to a silver-haired man in a tuxedo. Thank you, my dear, he replied, taking a glass. Excellent service here, as always. Ethan knows how to run a tight ship. Emily smiled professionally. We strive for perfection. Emily. Margaret's voice cut through the ambient chatter. Mr. Morgan is asking for you at the bar. Anxiety fluttered in her chest as she made her way across the room. Had something happened with Jake? He was supposed to be with Mrs. Chen, their elderly neighbor who had become an occasional backup sitter. Ethan stood at the bar in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, looking like he'd stepped out of a luxury advertisement. Several women nearby were casting appreciative glances his way, but his attention was fixed on a spreadsheet on his phone. You asked for me, Mr. Morgan? He looked up, and for a brief second, something flashed in his eyes that made her pulse quicken. Miss Brooks, yes. He pocketed his phone. I received an interesting call from my head chef this afternoon. Oh? Emily tensed, wondering what error she might have made. He tells me you corrected his wine pairing suggestion for the halibut special last night. Apparently, you recommended a Sancerre instead of the Chardonnay he'd selected. Heat rushed to Emily's cheeks. I apologize if I overstepped. The customers raved about it, Ethan interrupted. Chef Dominic was impressed. He said you displayed remarkable palate knowledge for a server. His eyebrow arched slightly. Care to explain how a waitress has such refined taste in French wines? Emily hesitated. Her past wasn't something she discussed, especially not with her intimidating boss. I've picked things up along the way. Along the way from where exactly? His voice had that same quiet intensity from their first confrontation, but something else colored it now. Curiosity. I read a lot, she deflected. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. Chef Dominic has worked in 3 Michelin-starred restaurants. He doesn't impress easily. I'm glad the customers enjoyed their meal. A slight smile played at the corner of his mouth. You're being evasive, Miss Brooks. And you're being nosy, Mr. Morgan, she replied before she could stop herself. Instead of the anger she expected, Ethan actually chuckled, a warm, genuine sound that transformed his usually severe features. The effect was startling. He was handsome at baseline, but when he smiled, he was devastating. Fair point. He raised his whiskey in a mock toast. How's Jake enjoying the office upstairs? The sudden change of subject caught her off guard. He loves it. Thank you again for that. It's been a lifesaver. She hesitated, then added, He mentions you often. Says you're teaching him multiplication. Ethan's expression softened almost imperceptibly. He's a bright kid. Picks things up quickly. He does. Emily felt a swell of maternal pride, followed by confusion at sharing this moment with Ethan Morgan of all people. "Mr. Morgan," a woman's voice interrupted them. "The mayor's waiting to speak with you." Ethan nodded. "Tell him I'll be right there." To Emily, he said, "We'll continue this conversation another time, Miss Brooks. I'm curious about that extensive wine knowledge of yours." As he walked away, Emily realized she'd been holding her breath. Whatever she'd expected from her aloof, demanding boss, it wasn't this growing interest in her life, or the unsettling way her body responded to his attention. Later that night, as the event wound down, Emily found herself alone in the empty bar area, tallying receipts. The gala had been a tremendous success, with generous donations flowing as freely as the champagne. "You should be proud," Ethan's voice came from behind her. The service was impeccable. Emily turned to find him leaning against the doorway, his bow tie undone and hanging loose around his neck. The slight dishevelment made him look more approachable, almost human. "The team worked well together," she acknowledged. "False modesty doesn't suit you." He moved into the room, pouring himself another whiskey. "I saw you save the Carmichael situation, Mrs. Carmichael is notoriously difficult, yet you had her laughing within minutes of the wine spill." Emily shrugged. "I just treated her like a person, not a problem." Ethan studied her for a moment, then said, "Where did you learn to handle people like that? It's not a skill most people have naturally." The question veered too close to topics Emily preferred to avoid. "It's getting late, I should check on Jake." "He's fine. I had my driver take him and Mrs. Chen home an hour ago. She has my number if there are any issues." Emily stared at him, conflicting emotions warring within her. "You what?" "Mrs. Chen mentioned at the last gala that she struggles to stay awake past 9. It seemed practical." He said this as if arranging personal transportation for an employee's child was the most natural thing in the world. "You can't just make decisions about my son without consulting me," Emily said, a flare of protective anger rising. "I appreciate your help, Mr. Morgan, but there are boundaries." Ethan looked genuinely surprised by her reaction. "I apologize. I thought I was being helpful. Jake is my responsibility. Mine." The strain of the long evening, combined with the confusing signals from her boss, frayed Emily's usual composure. "I've managed on my own for 6 years." "And you're doing an admirable job," Ethan said quietly. "But accepting help occasionally isn't failure, Emily." The use of her first name sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. In the quiet, empty restaurant with just the low lighting of the bar illuminating his features, the formality between them seemed to thin. "Why are you doing this?" she asked finally. "Doing what?" "The office for Jake, the math lessons, the driver tonight." "Why?" Ethan looked down at his whiskey, swirling it slowly. When he raised his eyes again, there was an unexpected vulnerability there. "I was 7 when my father became too busy to pick me up from school," he said. "The nanny would forget sometimes. I'd wait for hours, watching other kids leave with their parents." The revelation stunned Emily into silence. "Your son deserves better than that." Ethan's voice had hardened again, as if regretting the moment of openness. "And you're a valuable employee. It's simple business sense to retain good staff." But it wasn't simple business, and they both knew it. "I should go," Emily said, gathering her things. Ethan nodded. "My driver can take you home." She opened her mouth to refuse, then reconsidered. It was late, and the thought of the long bus ride was exhausting. "Thank you." As they walked to the sleek black car waiting outside, an unexpected, comfortable silence fell between them. When they reached the vehicle, Ethan opened the door for her, his hand briefly touching the small of her back, a light, fleeting contact that nonetheless sent warmth spreading through her. "Good night, Emily," he said softly. "Good night, Ethan," she replied, testing his name for the first time. The smile that spread across his face transformed him completely, and as the car pulled away, Emily knew with absolute certainty that she was in dangerous territory. Developing feelings for Ethan Morgan would be professionally catastrophic and emotionally reckless. But as the city lights blurred past the window, she couldn't help but wonder if it might already be too late to guard her heart. Ethan Morgan stared at the quarterly reports spread across his desk, but his mind kept drifting to the same distraction it had circled for weeks, Emily Brooks and her precocious son. He closed the financial folder with a frustrated sigh, running a hand through his dark hair. 3 months had passed since he'd discovered them in the break room, and against all business sense, he'd found himself increasingly involved in their lives. What had begun as a simple accommodation, the third-floor office for Jake, had evolved into something more complex. He'd started bringing educational games for the boy, listening to him read, even helping with basic math. And with Emily. The intercom buzzed, interrupting his thoughts. "Mr. Morgan, Miss Winters is here to see you." Rebecca, his ex-girlfriend and current business associate. Their relationship had ended 8 months ago, when Ethan realized her interest lay more in his fortune than in him personally. Unfortunately, her father's investment firm controlled significant interests in his restaurant expansion plans, making a clean break impossible. "Send her in," he replied, straightening his tie. Rebecca swept into the office in a cloud of designer perfume and calculated charm. At 34, she was strikingly beautiful, with sleek blonde hair and the polished appearance that came from unlimited resources and meticulous self-maintenance. "Ethan, darling," she purred, leaning in to kiss his cheek before he could evade. "You're looking deliciously overworked." "Rebecca," he acknowledged with a professional nod. "What brings you by?" She settled into a chair, crossing legs showcased by a skirt that probably cost more than most of his employees made in a month. "Can I check on my favorite restaurateur? Daddy's been asking about the Chicago location. Construction is on schedule. We open in 3 months. Excellent." Her practiced smile didn't reach her eyes. "But that's not why I'm really here. I miss you, Ethan." He suppressed a sigh. "We've been through this. We're better as business associates." "Are we?" She leaned forward. "We were good together. The Morgan Winters power couple. Everyone said so." "Everyone except us," Ethan replied dryly. Rebecca's eyes narrowed slightly. "Is there someone else? That's it, isn't it?" Before Ethan could respond, a soft knock came at the door, and Emily appeared with a stack of invoices. She froze momentarily at the sight of Rebecca. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, professionalism masking any reaction. "Margaret asked me to bring these up for your signature." "Not at all, Miss Brooks," Ethan said, relief washing through him at the interruption. "Please come in." Rebecca's gaze sharpened as she assessed Emily, taking in everything from her simple waitress uniform to her lack of expensive accessories. Her mouth curved into a smile that had all the warmth of an Arctic winter. "Well, aren't you dedicated, bringing paperwork personally to the boss?" she said, her tone making the words an insinuation. Emily's expression remained perfectly composed, but Ethan noticed the slight tightening around her eyes. "Just doing my job, ma'am," she replied, placing the invoices on his desk. "Would you like me to come back later, Mr. Morgan?" "No need," he said quickly. "Rebecca was just leaving." Rebecca laughed, a melodious sound entirely at odds with the ice in her eyes. "Was I? How presumptuous of you, Ethan." She stood, smoothing her skirt. "But you're right, I have a lunch date. We'll continue our discussion later." She turned to Emily with a predatory smile. "Do take care of him. He works himself much too hard." After she'd gone, an awkward silence filled the office. "I apologize for Rebecca," Ethan said finally. "She's complicated." "Your girlfriend seems lovely," Emily replied, her tone carefully neutral. "Ex-girlfriend," he corrected firmly. "And she's about as lovely as a cobra." A smile tugged at Emily's lips before she caught herself. "It's not my place to comment on your personal life, Mr. Morgan." "Why not? I've certainly inserted myself into yours." The words came out more candidly than he'd intended. Emily's eyes widened slightly at his honesty. "That's different. You were helping Jake." "And myself," Ethan admitted. "Your son's company is refreshingly uncomplicated compared to most of my interactions." Emily studied him for a moment, then said, "Jake asked if you could come to his school presentation next week. It's career day. I told him you're much too busy." The request caught Ethan off guard. "He wants me there?" "Apparently you're the coolest grown-up he knows because you own restaurants and can do division in your head." A reluctant smile softened her features, But I understand if you can't. What time? Ethan interrupted. Emily blinked. 2 o'clock. But really, there's no obligation. I'll be there. The decision felt right in a way few things had lately. Text me the details. As Emily nodded and turned to leave, Ethan found himself saying, "Would you and Jake like to join me for dinner tonight? At my home, not the restaurant." The invitation surprised them both. Emily hesitated, clearly caught off guard. "As friends," Ethan added hastily, though the word felt inadequate. "Jake mentioned he's never had homemade pizza, and my chef makes an exceptional margarita. You want us to come to your home? For pizza?" Emily looked genuinely perplexed. "Is that so strange? For a CEO to invite his waitress and her son for a casual dinner?" "Yes, it's decidedly strange, Mr. Morgan." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "We could be on a first-name basis by now, don't you think? Especially since I'm attending career day." A flush rose to her cheeks. "Ethan, then," she conceded. "But this dinner, people will talk. Let them." He surprised himself with how little he cared about appearances anymore. "It's just pizza, Emily." After a long moment, she nodded. "Jake would love that. What time should we come?" As they worked out the details, Ethan felt an unfamiliar lightness. For years, his life had been consumed by building his restaurant empire, expanding the legacy his father had begun. Somewhere along the way, he'd forgotten what it was like to simply enjoy someone's company without strategic advantage in mind. Emily and Jake were changing that, and he wasn't entirely sure what to do about it. Ethan's home turned out to be a stunning penthouse apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. Emily tried not to gape as the private elevator opened directly into a spacious foyer of marble and tasteful modern art. "Your place is bigger than our whole apartment building," Jake whispered in awe. "Jake," Emily admonished, gently embarrassed. Ethan laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his usually serious face. "He's not wrong. It's excessive for one person, honestly." He led them through to an open-concept living area where a chef in whites was arranging ingredients on a massive kitchen island. "Miss Brooks, young mister." "Brooks, welcome," the chef greeted them. "I'm Antonio. I hear we're making pizza tonight." Jake's face lit up. "Can I help?" "That's the plan," Ethan said, rolling up his sleeves. "Antonio is going to teach us all." Emily watched in amazement as her normally reserved, intimidating boss donned an apron and began kneading dough alongside her son. The Ethan Morgan in finance magazines and business reports seemed worlds away from this relaxed man, patiently showing Jake how to stretch pizza dough without tearing it. "You look surprised," Ethan commented, catching her expression. "I am," she admitted. "I didn't know CEOs made their own pizza." "This one doesn't usually," Antonio interjected with a grin. "Mr. Morgan's culinary adventures typically end with me cleaning smoke from the oven." "Betrayed by my own staff," Ethan said with mock offense, winking at Jake. "Don't listen to him. I'm excellent at ordering takeout." Jake giggled, his small hands covered in flour. "Mom says I'm not allowed to use the stove without supervision." "Smart woman, your mom," Ethan agreed, his eyes meeting Emily's over Jake's head with an unexpected warmth that made her heart stumble. The evening unfolded with surprising ease. They assembled pizzas, traditional margarita for Ethan, pepperoni for Jake, and a sophisticated mushroom and truffle version for Emily that Antonio insisted she'd enjoy. As they ate at the large dining table, the formality between employer and employee gradually dissolved. "So," Ethan said casually as they finished their meal, "are you ever going to tell me how a waitress knows the difference between Loire Valley Sancerre and Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc?" Emily tensed slightly. Her past wasn't something she discussed openly, especially not with her boss. But something about the evening, the casual setting, Jake's obvious comfort with Ethan, the way Ethan had shared his home without pretense, made her hesitate. "I wasn't always a waitress," she admitted finally. Ethan raised an eyebrow, waiting. "I was a sommelier, and studying for my master sommelier certification." The words felt strange to say aloud after so many years. Jake looked up curiously. "What's a sommelier, Mom?" "It's a wine expert, buddy." Ethan explained before Emily could answer. A very, very knowledgeable one. It's incredibly difficult to become one. He turned back to Emily, genuine interest in his expression. What happened? Emily glanced at Jake, who was happily devouring his second slice of pizza. Some parts of her story weren't appropriate for young ears. Sensing her hesitation, Ethan said, "Jake, would you like to see something cool? Antonio has an ice cream machine in the kitchen." As Jake eagerly followed Antonio, Emily gathered her thoughts. When they were alone, she spoke quietly. "I was engaged to a restaurateur in San Francisco. We were opening a place together. My wine program, his cuisine. I invested everything I had, including my inheritance from my grandmother." Ethan's expression darkened, clearly anticipating where this was going. "A week before our opening, I discovered he'd been embezzling funds and sleeping with our investor. The familiar burn of humiliation had dulled over the years, but never completely disappeared. When I confronted him, he claimed everything was in his name. Legally, he wasn't wrong. He stole from you," Ethan said, his voice hardening. Emily nodded. "The business, my savings, my reputation in the industry. I was 7 months pregnant with Jake when it happened." Ethan's hand clenched around his water glass. "What's his name?" The dangerous edge in his tone made Emily look up sharply. "That's not why I told you. Humor me. Daniel Porter, but it doesn't matter now. It was 6 years ago." Recognition flashed in Ethan's eyes. "Porter Bistro? In the Mission District?" Emily nodded, surprised. "You know it?" "I know of him," Ethan said grimly. "He has a reputation, not a good one." Before she could respond, Jake returned with Antonio, proudly carrying a bowl of homemade gelato. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, but Emily caught Ethan watching her with an unreadable expression several times throughout the remainder of the evening. Later, as Ethan walked them to his private elevator, Jake yawned widely, the excitement of the evening finally catching up to him. "Thank you for dinner," Emily said softly. "It was unexpected, but nice." "We should do it again," Ethan replied, his usual confidence momentarily replaced by something that almost looked like uncertainty. "Maybe without Antonio next time. I do know how to use a microwave." Emily laughed. "Setting the bar high, I see." In the quiet moment that followed, with Jake drowsily leaning against her side, Emily became acutely aware of how close Ethan stood, of the subtle scent of his cologne, of the way his eyes lingered on her face. "Emily," he began, his voice low. "This is complicated," she interrupted gently. "You're my boss. Is that the only complication?" She thought of Jake, of her carefully constructed life, of the walls she'd built after Daniel's betrayal. "No, but it's a significant one." Ethan nodded, accepting her boundary without pushing further. As the elevator doors opened, he crouched down to Jake's level. "Thank you for teaching me about the importance of extra cheese, Mr. Brooks. I'll see you at career day." Jake gave him a sleepy smile. "Good night, Mr. Ethan." As the elevator descended, Emily tried to ignore the flutter in her chest and the growing certainty that, boss or not, Ethan Morgan was becoming far too important to both her and her son. Friday arrived with unexpected complications. Emily stood in her modest apartment, phone pressed to her ear, listening to Mrs. Chen's apologetic explanation of why she couldn't babysit Jake that evening. "I'm so sorry, dear. This cold came on suddenly." The elderly woman's voice was indeed congested. "I wouldn't want Jake to catch it." "Please don't worry," Emily assured her, even as disappointment settled in her stomach. "Feel better soon." After hanging up, she stared at her reflection in the mirror. She'd spent her last free hour before picking up Jake from school, carefully applying makeup and styling her hair. The simple black dress she wore, her one nice outfit reserved for job interviews and parent-teacher conferences, suddenly seemed like a foolish indulgence. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Looking forward to tonight. 7 p.m. still work?" Emily sighed, fingers hovering over the keyboard. She should cancel. It was the sensible thing to do. Instead, she found herself typing, "Babysitter canceled. Rain check." His response came almost immediately. "I'll pick you both up at 6:30. Jake is always welcome. A smile tugged at her lips despite her reservations. That wasn't what she'd expected. Most men she'd known would have simply postponed. But Ethan Morgan continued to defy her expectations. "I can't ask you to change your plans," she replied. "You didn't," I offered. "Unless you'd rather reschedule?" Emily glanced at the dress she'd been looking forward to wearing all week, then thought of Jake's face lighting up at the prospect of another evening with Ethan. Against her better judgment, she texted back, "6:30 works. Jake will be thrilled." Ethan's sleek black car arrived precisely at 6:30. Emily had managed to help Jake with homework, get him bathed and dressed in his nicest clothes, and even reapply her own makeup after an unfortunate incident involving Jake's science project and blue food coloring. "Mr. Ethan," Jake exclaimed as they approached the car. "Mom said we're having dinner with you. Do we get to go to your big apartment again?" Ethan emerged from the car, looking devastatingly handsome in a tailored navy suit. His eyes widened slightly as they took in Emily's appearance, lingering for a moment before he smiled at Jake. "I thought we'd try something different tonight," he replied, crouching to Jake's level. "Have you ever been to the aquarium after hours?" Jake's jaw dropped. "The aquarium closes at 5. Mom checked last summer." "Usually, yes," Ethan agreed, a conspiratorial gleam in his eye. "But sometimes they open specially for people who help with their conservation programs." Emily stared at him. "You changed our dinner reservation to the aquarium? How did you even manage that on such short notice?" Ethan straightened, meeting her gaze with a hint of uncertainty beneath his usual confidence. "Is it too much? I thought Jake might enjoy it, and they do have an excellent restaurant overlooking the main tank." The thoughtfulness of the gesture, rearranging an entire evening to include her son, rather than simply postponing, struck Emily deeply. "It's perfect," she said softly. The smile that spread across Ethan's face made her heart flutter, in a way that had nothing to do with gratitude. The aquarium after hours was magical. Their footsteps echoed in the nearly empty exhibits as a marine biologist named Dr. Chen led them through spaces usually crowded with tourists. Jake listened with rapt attention as she explained about different species, his eyes wide with wonder at the illuminated tanks. "Can I touch the stingrays?" he asked hopefully, when they reached the shallow touch pool. "That's why we're here," Dr. Chen replied, helping him roll up his sleeves. As Jake squealed with delight at the velvety feel of the rays gliding beneath his fingers, Emily found Ethan watching her, a gentle expression on his face. "Thank you for this," she said quietly. "You've made his entire year." "And you?" Ethan asked, his voice low. "Have I made your evening worthwhile despite the change in plans?" The sincerity in his question touched her. "More than. This is. I don't even have words." "You deserve beautiful things, Emily," he said simply. "Both of you do." Before she could respond, Jake called excitedly for them to join him, and the moment passed. But Emily felt something shift between them, a deepening connection that both thrilled and terrified her. Dinner was served in a private room with one glass wall facing the enormous main tank. Elegant table settings contrasted with the ethereal blue light from the water, where sharks and rays glided past in hypnotic patterns. Jake, exhausted from excitement, actually sat still and used his best manners as they enjoyed a meal that would have cost Emily half a week's salary. "So," Ethan said, after they'd ordered dessert and Jake had become absorbed in watching a particularly large sea turtle, "I've been thinking about our conversation at my apartment." Emily tensed slightly. "About Daniel?" Ethan nodded. "I did some research. Porter Bistro is struggling. He's got a reputation for cutting corners, underpaying staff, not to mention his personal behavior." "That sounds like Daniel," Emily agreed, a familiar bitterness rising. "But why were you researching him?" Ethan hesitated, then reached for his phone. "Because of this." He pulled up an article from a prominent food magazine. The headline read, "Rising Star. Morgan's Fine Dining announces new wine director for flagship location." Emily stared at him, uncomprehending. "You've hired a new wine director?" "Not yet." Ethan's eyes held hers steadily. "I'm hoping you'll consider the position." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "What?" Your knowledge is wasted serving tables, Emily. You were training for Master Sommelier certification. That's exactly the caliber of expertise we need for our flagship location. Emily shook her head, trying to process his words. Ethan, I haven't worked in wine professionally in 6 years. But you've kept up with it, haven't you? The Sancerre recommendation for the halibut. The way you corrected our Italian regional designations on the menu last month. He was right. Even with the demands of single motherhood and making ends meet, Emily had never stopped reading, learning, tasting when she could afford it. Wine had been her passion before Daniel, and somehow, she'd never fully let it go. The position comes with a significant salary increase, Ethan continued. Regular hours, benefits. No more late-night shifts or weekend work. Time for Jake. It sounded too good to be true. Why would you do this? Because you're qualified, Ethan replied simply. Your background checks out. You studied under Philippe Marceau. He's legendary. Your palate is exceptional. This isn't charity, Emily, it's good business. But they both knew it wasn't just business, not anymore. And if things don't work out between us personally? She asked quietly. What happens to my job then? Ethan's expression grew serious. The position is yours regardless of our personal relationship. I've had legal draw-up paperwork to that effect. He paused. I want to see where this could go between us, Emily. But I would never use employment as leverage. Ever. The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. Still, years of hard-earned caution made her hesitate. I need time to think about it. Of course. Ethan nodded. The offer stands whenever you're ready. Jake's delighted exclamation at the arrival of his chocolate lava cake broke the tension, and conversation shifted to lighter topics. But the possibility Ethan had opened up, a return to the career she'd loved, financial stability, regular hours with Jake, hummed in the background of Emily's thoughts for the remainder of the evening. Later, as Ethan walked them to their apartment door, Jake yawned widely, the excitement of the evening finally catching up to him. Thank you for taking us to see the fish, he said sleepily. That was the best not date ever. Emily flushed at her son's characterization, but Ethan merely chuckled. You're very welcome, Jake. Maybe next time we can see the dinosaurs at the Natural History Museum. Jake's eyes widened despite his fatigue. Promise? If your mom agrees, Ethan replied, glancing at Emily with a question in his eyes. We'll see, she said, not wanting to commit while her head was still spinning from his job offer. Say goodnight, Jake. After Jake had given Ethan a surprise hug and gone inside to get ready for bed, Emily found herself alone with Ethan in the hallway of her modest apartment building. The contrast between his bespoke suit and the faded carpet beneath their feet highlighted the worlds that separated them, worlds that his job offer might begin to bridge. I meant what I said, Ethan said quietly, about the position being yours regardless. I had the employment contract drafted with specific clauses to protect you. You really thought of everything, Emily replied, a hint of wonder in her voice. Not everything. He stepped closer, his gaze dropping briefly to her lips. I never planned on meeting someone like you, Emily. You and Jake. You've changed something in me. Reminded me there's more to life than balance sheets and expansion plans. The raw honesty in his voice made her breath catch. They stood close enough that she could smell his cologne, feel the warmth radiating from him. Ethan, she whispered, uncertainty and longing warring within her. May I kiss you? He asked, his voice low. The question, so formal and respectful, made her smile despite her nervousness. Yes. The first touch of his lips against hers was gentle, almost reverential. Then as she responded, the kiss deepened, his hand coming up to cradle her face with surprising tenderness. Emily felt herself melting into him, 6 years of guarded solitude crumbling under the heat of his touch. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since I found you teaching Jake multiplication in my break room. Emily laughed softly. That's a strange moment to feel attraction. You stood your ground, defended your son. Most people cower when I'm angry. His thumb traced her cheekbone. You were magnificent. A door opening down the hall reminded Emily of where they were. She stepped back reluctantly. I should check on Jake. Ethan nodded, his eyes still dark with emotion. Think about the offer. Both offers. I will, she promised. That night, after tucking Jake in, Emily sat at her small kitchen table with a notepad, attempting to list the pros and cons of accepting Ethan's job proposal. The professional opportunity was extraordinary, a chance to reclaim the career path she'd abandoned when Daniel's betrayal and Jake's birth had upended her life. The personal implications were more complex. Dating her boss, even with contractual protections, carried risks. Opening her heart after years of careful self-sufficiency was terrifying. And then there was Jake, already growing attached to Ethan, if things didn't work out. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. Thank you for a wonderful evening. Jake is an extraordinary kid. You've done an amazing job with him. Emily smiled, warmth spreading through her chest at his acknowledgement of what mattered most to her. Her son. Before she could reply, another message appeared. No pressure on the job offer, or anything else. Just know that whatever you decide, I'm not going anywhere. The simple reassurance eased something in her that had been tightly wound for years. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to take a chance again. Emily's first day as wine director at Morgan's flagship restaurant began with a mix of excitement and trepidation. The staff had been informed of her promotion, and while most offered genuine congratulations, she couldn't miss the speculative glances and whispered conversations that stopped when she entered rooms. Margaret, in particular, had been coldly professional, her clipped congratulations doing little to mask her suspicion about how a waitress had suddenly vaulted to management. Don't let them intimidate you, James, Ethan's head chef, advised as they reviewed the dinner pairings. I've worked with sommeliers from Paris to Tokyo. Your palate is exceptional. Thank you, Emily replied, grateful for the vote of confidence. But I need to prove myself. And you will, he assured her. Though from what I hear, you already have the boss's confidence. The knowing glint in his eye made Emily flush. This position is based on my qualifications, she said firmly. James raised his hands in surrender. I didn't suggest otherwise, but it's no secret Ethan's been different lately, happier. The staff's noticed. Before Emily could respond, her phone chimed with a text from Jake's after-school program. Jake fell during soccer. Possible sprained ankle. Please come when possible. Emily's heart raced as she excused herself to call them, learning that Jake was in pain but not serious danger. Still, she needed to collect him immediately. On her first day in her new position. The irony wasn't lost on her. She found Margaret in the main dining room overseeing table arrangements. I have a family emergency. Jake's hurt at school, I need to go. Margaret's eyebrow arched. On your first day? How convenient. Emily forced herself to remain professional despite the insinuation. My son has possibly sprained his ankle. I'll make up the hours. That's not how director positions work, Margaret replied coolly. Perhaps you should discuss with Mr. Morgan whether this role is compatible with your situation. The implication that single motherhood made her somehow less capable ignited Emily's temper, but years of customer service had taught her to control her reactions. I'll discuss it with him when he returns from his meeting. In the meantime, I'm going to collect my injured child. As she turned to leave, she nearly collided with Ethan, who had entered the restaurant unnoticed. Discuss what with me? He asked, looking between them with concern. Jake's hurt at school, Emily explained quickly. I need to go. Understanding immediately replaced his confusion. Of course, take my car. Johnson's waiting outside. Do you need me to come with you? The offer touched her, but Emily shook her head. I've got this, but thank you. Keep me updated, Ethan said, before turning to Margaret with a cooler expression. Was there a problem with Miss Brooks leaving to tend to her son? Margaret's face tightened. Not at all, sir. I merely expressed concern about the demands of a director position with her. Personal responsibilities. Ethan's expression hardened. Miss Brooks' qualifications for this position are beyond question. As for her personal responsibilities, I consider her commitment to her son admirable, not problematic. Is that clear? Perfectly, sir, Margaret replied stiffly. Emily slipped away during the exchange, both grateful for Ethan's support and uncomfortable with him fighting her battles. She had worked hard to stand on her own since Daniel's betrayal, and maintaining her independence mattered, even as her heart warmed at Ethan's defense. Hours later, with Jake settled on their couch with his elevated ankle wrapped in ice, Emily heard a gentle knock at their apartment door. She opened it to find Ethan holding a large bag from Jake's favorite burger place and a smaller bag from a pharmacy. "I thought you might not have had time for dinner," he said. "And I brought some proper ankle wraps and children's pain relievers. How is he?" The thoughtfulness of the gesture brought unexpected tears to Emily's eyes. "It's just a mild sprain. He'll be fine in a few days. May I come in? Or is it too late?" Emily glanced at her watch, surprised to find it was already past 8. "No, please." Jake's still awake. "Mr. Ethan," Jake called from the couch when he spotted their visitor. "Look at my battle wound." He pointed proudly to his wrapped ankle. "Very impressive," Ethan replied seriously, setting down the food to examine Jake's injury with exaggerated care. "Definitely the mark of a brave warrior. I brought reinforcements." He held up the burger bag. "Cheeseburgers?" Jake asked hopefully, "with extra pickles as requested last time." As they ate dinner together in Emily's small living room, she was struck by how natural it felt. Ethan in his expensive suit sitting cross-legged on her worn carpet, listening intently to Jake's dramatic retelling of his soccer field injury. 4 weeks later, Emily stood in her bedroom staring at an open suitcase on her bed. Packing for San Francisco felt surreal, like reaching backward through time to touch a life she'd once believed forever lost. Jake burst into the room, his excitement palpable. "Mom, did you pack my dinosaur shirt? Mr. Ethan said we might see real dinosaur bones at the museum." Emily smiled, tucking the shirt into his small suitcase. "All packed, buddy. Are you excited about riding on Mr. Ethan's private plane?" "So excited." Jake bounced on his toes. "Do you think I can sit in the cockpit?" "We'll have to ask the pilot," Emily replied, zipping the suitcase closed. "Now go brush your teeth. We need to leave in 20 minutes. As Jake raced off, Emily sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly overwhelmed. In the 3 months since accepting the wine director position, her life had transformed almost beyond recognition. The job itself was challenging and rewarding, allowing her to rediscover skills she'd feared lost forever. Her relationship with Ethan had deepened into something she'd never expected to find again after Daniel's betrayal. Trust, respect, and a growing love that still terrified her in its intensity. But returning to San Francisco, that was a different kind of challenge altogether. The city held too many memories, too many ghosts. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Car arriving in 15. You okay?" His intuitive understanding of her anxiety was still something she was adjusting to. She texted back, "Just nervous. Haven't been back since." His response was immediate. "I'll be right beside you. Both of you. Always." The simple promise steadied her. Whatever awaited in San Francisco, she wouldn't face it alone. The Morgan Group's newest restaurant occupied prime real estate on the Embarcadero, with sweeping views of the Bay Bridge. Emily stood in the nearly completed dining room, running her fingers along the polished bar top as memories washed over her. Another restaurant, another dream, another life. "What do you think?" Ethan asked, coming to stand beside her. "It's beautiful," she said honestly. "The light in here is extraordinary." That was a key factor in choosing the location. He studied her face. "Are you all right?" Emily nodded, though all right felt like an oversimplification of the complex emotions churning inside her. "It's strange being back, like visiting a different lifetime." Ethan's hand found hers, his thumb tracing reassuring circles on her palm. "We can leave any time you want, just say the word." "No," Emily said firmly. "I need to be here, to reclaim this city on my terms." She smiled up at him. "Besides, Jake would never forgive us if we left before seeing the dinosaurs." As if summoned by his name, Jake came bounding across the restaurant, followed by Antonio, who had joined them on the trip to oversee the final kitchen preparations. "Mom, the kitchen is huge. Antonio says it's twice as big as the one at home." "Is that so?" Emily laughed, grateful for the interruption. "And," Jake continued breathlessly, "there's a special wine room with glass walls that Antonio says is just for you." Emily glanced at Ethan, who shrugged with a smile. Surprise. I thought you might want your own space to conduct tastings with local vintners. The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched her deeply. Before she could respond, Ethan's phone rang. His expression tightened as he checked the caller ID. I need to take this, he said apologetically. It's the contractor. Why don't you two explore the rest of the restaurant? I'll join you in a few minutes. As Ethan stepped away, Emily and Jake wandered through the elegant space. The restaurant was scheduled to open in 2 days, and staff bustled about making final preparations. Emily tried to ignore the uncomfortable sense of déjà vu. She'd been in this position before, standing in a nearly completed restaurant filled with promise, unaware that everything was about to collapse around her. Hey there. A deep voice startled her from her thoughts. You must be Emily Brooks. She turned to find a tall man with salt and pepper hair and a confident smile extending his hand. I'm Richard Morgan, Ethan's father. Emily's breath caught. Ethan rarely spoke of his father, and when he did, it was with a careful neutrality that suggested complicated feelings beneath. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Morgan. Please, call me Richard. His handshake was firm, his assessment of her subtle but thorough. And this young man must be Jake. Jake nodded, suddenly shy. Yes, sir. Ethan tells me you're quite the mathematician, Richard said, crouching to Jake's level. I used to help Ethan with his math homework when he was about your age. Emily watched the interaction closely, noting the genuine warmth in Richard's manner with Jake. It contrasted sharply with Ethan's description of a distant work-obsessed father. Dad. Ethan's voice was carefully controlled as he rejoined them. I didn't realize you were in town already. I caught an earlier flight. Richard straightened, clapping his son on the shoulder. Couldn't miss the pre-opening preparations for our San Francisco flagship. Our? Ethan's eyebrow arched slightly. Richard laughed. Force of habit. Your restaurant, of course. You've done remarkably well expanding the Morgan Group. Your mother would be proud. A shadow crossed Ethan's face at the mention of his mother. Emily, Jake, would you excuse us for a moment? I need to discuss something with my father. As they stepped away, Emily couldn't help but notice the tension in Ethan's shoulders. Clearly, there was more to his relationship with his father than he'd shared. Is Mr. Ethan mad at his dad? Jake whispered, always perceptive. I'm not sure, sweetie. Grown-up relationships can be complicated sometimes. Like you and my dad? Jake asked innocently. The question caught Emily off guard. Jake rarely mentioned Daniel, and she'd never been entirely sure how much he understood about his absent father. That's different. But yes, sometimes people who care about each other still have difficult feelings. Jake nodded sagely. I think Mr. Ethan's dad made him sad. His face got all tight like yours does when you get a bill in the mail. Emily stifled a laugh at the apt comparison. You're very observant. Miss Brooks? A young woman in a crisp uniform approached. Mr. Morgan asked me to show you to your hotel. The car is waiting whenever you're ready. Emily hesitated, glancing toward Ethan, who was still engaged in what appeared to be an increasingly tense conversation with his father. Could you give us a moment? I'd like to say goodbye. Of course. The woman stepped back discreetly. Emily led Jake toward Ethan, but before they reached him, she caught a fragment of Richard's lowered voice. Not repeating what happened with Porter Bistro. The board won't allow it. Emily froze. Porter Bistro? Daniel's restaurant? What possible connection could it have to the Morgans? Ethan caught sight of her standing there and immediately ended the conversation. Emily, is everything all right? She forced a smile, acutely aware of Jake's presence. Yes, we were just heading to the hotel. The assistant said you'd arranged a car? Right? Ethan seemed distracted but quickly recovered. I'll join you for dinner in about an hour. There's a great little Italian place near the hotel that Jake will love. Sounds perfect. Emily hesitated, then added, It was nice meeting you, Mr. Morgan. Richard's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Likewise, Miss Brooks, I look forward to getting to know you better during your stay. Something in his tone raised warning flags in Emily's mind, but she simply nodded and guided Jake toward the waiting car. As they drove through the familiar streets of San Francisco, Emily's mind raced. What had Richard meant about what happened with Porter Bistro? How were the Morgans connected to Daniel's restaurant? And why hadn't Ethan ever mentioned it? The uneasy feeling that had plagued her since arriving in San Francisco intensified. She'd come here hoping to make peace with her past, but instead she sensed that the past might be about to complicate her future in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The Italian restaurant was everything Ethan had promised: cozy, authentic, and welcoming to children. Under normal circumstances, Emily would have been utterly charmed by the checkered tablecloths and warm bread served with house-made olive oil. But the conversation she'd overheard kept replaying in her mind, casting a shadow over the evening. "You're quiet tonight," Ethan observed as Jake happily demolished a plate of spaghetti and meatballs. Emily met his gaze directly. "I overheard something at the restaurant today. Your father mentioned Porter Bistro." Ethan's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Ah, that's it? Ah?" Emily kept her voice low, conscious of Jake nearby. "Ethan, what's going on? How do you and your father know about Daniel's restaurant?" Ethan sighed, placing his fork down carefully. "It's complicated, Emily, and not a conversation for right now." He nodded toward Jake. Emily wanted to press further, but he was right. Whatever this was, it wasn't a discussion to have in front of her son. "Later then, but I need to know, Ethan." "You will," he promised. "Tonight, after Jake's asleep." The remainder of the meal passed in strained conversation about safe topics: Jake's excitement about tomorrow's museum visit, the upcoming restaurant opening, the unusually perfect weather San Francisco was enjoying. Back at the hotel suite, Emily tucked an exhausted Jake into bed, grateful that the day's activities had worn him out enough that he fell asleep almost immediately. When she emerged from his room, she found Ethan on the balcony, staring out at the city lights, a glass of whiskey in his hand. "He's asleep," she said, closing the balcony door behind her. Ethan nodded, not turning around. "Emily, before I explain, I need you to know something. Everything I've told you about how I feel about you and Jake is the absolute truth. I never expected to find you, to find this. It changed everything. Changed." The gravity in his voice sent a chill through her. "Just tell me, Ethan." He turned to face her, his expression pained. The Morgan Group was the silent investor in Porter Bistro. The words hit Emily like a physical blow. "What? Not me," Ethan clarified quickly. "My father." It was one of his side projects, not officially part of our restaurant group. I was expanding our East Coast operations at the time. Emily's mind reeled as she tried to process this information. "So when Daniel stole my inheritance, my designs for the wine program, your father was his partner?" "Not exactly." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she recognized as signaling his distress. "From what I've pieced together, my father invested in Porter's concept. When Porter ran into financial difficulties, he diverted funds, embezzled, essentially, including your investment." "And your father did nothing?" Emily's voice rose despite her effort to control it. "He didn't know about you, Emily. Porter presented himself as the sole owner. By the time my father realized what was happening, Porter had already opened using the stolen funds. Rather than create a public scandal, my father quietly pulled his support, ensuring the restaurant would eventually fail." "Eventually?" Emily's laugh was bitter. "It took 6 years, Ethan. 6 years while I struggled to rebuild my life, while Daniel profited from what he stole from me." "I know." Ethan's voice was heavy with regret. "I didn't know any of this until recently. When you told me about Porter, I started digging. That's when I discovered my father's involvement." Emily paced the balcony, trying to process this bombshell. "So the health inspections, the tax audit, that wasn't just you seeking justice for me. You were cleaning up your family's mess." Ethan flinched as if she'd struck him. "It was both, Emily. Yes, I wanted to right a wrong my family was indirectly part of. But more than that, I wanted justice for you. Why didn't you tell me this when you first found out?" The question that hurt the most. "I was afraid." The admission clearly cost him. "Afraid of losing you and Jake. Afraid you'd think I was somehow complicit. By the time I fully understood what had happened, we were already." He gestured between them, encompassing the relationship they'd built. Emily stared at him, a horrible thought forming. Ethan, did you hire me because of guilt? Was the wine director position some kind of reparation? No! The vehemence in his denial was startling. Emily, I hired you because you're brilliant at what you do, because your talent was being wasted. My feelings for you, my respect for your abilities, those are entirely separate from anything my father did. Emily wanted to believe him, but the revelation had cracked the foundation of trust they'd been building. I need time to process this, Ethan. He nodded, clearly devastated but accepting. I understand. I'll move to another room tonight. No, Emily sighed. This is your suite. I'll take Jake and move to another room. I need space. Emily, please. He reached for her hand but stopped when she stepped back. I never meant to hurt you. Everything between us has been real, is real. Maybe. Emily felt tears threatening and fought them back. But right now, I don't know what to believe anymore. She turned and went inside, closing the balcony door behind her. With shaking hands, she called the front desk and arranged for another room, then gently woke Jake and gathered their things. She left a note for Ethan, explaining that she needed time alone but would meet him tomorrow for Jake's sake. As she settled Jake into the new room, her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. I understand you need space, but there's more you should know. Something in my father's office safe that concerns you directly. Talk tomorrow? Emily stared at the cryptic message, her curiosity warring with her hurt and anger. Finally, she texted back a single word. Yes. Whatever revelations awaited, she would face them. She owed herself that much. Morning brought no clarity, only the practical reality of explaining to a confused 6-year-old why they had changed rooms in the middle of the night. Did you and Mr. Ethan have a fight? Jake asked over breakfast in the hotel restaurant, his perception once again cutting to the heart of the matter. Emily sighed. How much could she explain without burdening him with adult complexities? Not exactly a fight, sweetie. Sometimes grown-ups need to take a step back and think about things. Jake's brow furrowed. Is it because of what his dad said? About the restaurant? Emily nearly choked on her coffee. What do you mean? Jake shrugged, attacking his pancakes with renewed interest. I heard them talking about someone named Porter. That's my last name. Emily's heart sank. Of course Jake would have caught that name, the one linked to the father he barely remembered. Yes, that's part of it. It's complicated, buddy. Is Mr. Ethan still taking us to see the dinosaurs? The practical concerns of a 6-year-old. Despite everything, Emily smiled. Yes. He'll meet us in the lobby at 10. As if summoned by their conversation, Ethan appeared at their table, looking like he hadn't slept. His eyes met Emily's, filled with quiet desperation. Good morning, he said carefully. Mr. Ethan. Jake's enthusiasm was undiminished by adult tensions. Mom says we're still going to see the dinosaurs. Absolutely. Ethan's smile for Jake was genuine, if strained. I never break a promise, buddy. The simple statement hung in the air between them, layered with meaning. To Jake, a promise about a museum visit. To Emily, a reminder of all the promises, spoken and unspoken, that now seemed precarious. May I join you? Ethan asked, addressing Emily directly. She nodded, watching as he took the seat across from her. The familiar comfort of his presence now complicated by doubt and questions. I thought we might stop by my father's office after the museum, Ethan said quietly. There's something you need to see. What is it? Emily asked, keeping her voice level for Jake's benefit. Documents, from 6 years ago. Ethan's expression was grave. About Porter Bistro and you. Emily's pulse quickened. Your father kept records about me? Not exactly. Ethan glanced at Jake, who was happily focused on his pancakes. It's better if you see for yourself. The day unfolded in a strange disconnect. The joy of watching Jake's face light up at the sight of towering dinosaur skeletons contrasted sharply with the tension simmering between Emily and Ethan. They maintained a united front for Jake's sake, taking photos of him beside exhibits, answering his endless questions, even sharing strained smiles when he insisted they pose for a family picture with a T-Rex. Family. The word echoed painfully in Emily's mind. She'd begun to imagine a future with Ethan, had allowed herself to hope for a family that included him. Now, that vision seemed to waver like a mirage. After lunch, they drove to the Morgan Group's corporate headquarters, a sleek high-rise with commanding views of the city. Richard Morgan's office occupied the entire top floor, a testament to the empire he'd built. "Jake, buddy," Ethan said as they entered the reception area. "Miss Collins here has some awesome video games in the conference room. Would it be okay if you played while Mom and I talk to my dad?" Jake looked between them, clearly sensing the gravity of the situation despite their attempts to shield him. "Is everything okay?" Emily knelt to his level. "Everything's fine, sweetie. This is just boring grown-up business stuff. We won't be long." "Promise?" Jake's eyes, so like her own, searched her face. "Promise." She kissed his forehead. "Go have fun." As the receptionist led Jake away, Ethan turned to Emily. "Are you ready for this?" "No," she admitted, "but I need to know." Richard Morgan's office was exactly what Emily would have expected. Expansive, meticulously organized, with the kind of understated luxury that spoke of old money and established power. Richard himself stood as they entered, his expression neutral but watchful. "Miss Brooks, Ethan." He gestured to the seating area. "Please." Once they were seated, Richard fixed his gaze on Emily. "My son tells me he's informed you of my past connection to Daniel Porter." "Yes." Emily matched his directness, though I'm still unclear on the details. Richard nodded, as if approving her approach. 6 years ago, I was looking to diversify our holdings in the San Francisco market. Porter's concept seemed promising and his references checked out. I agreed to be a silent partner, providing capital in exchange for a 40% stake. Emily's hands clenched in her lap. "And you had no idea he was stealing from me? From others?" "Initially, no." Richard's gaze was steady. "By the time I discovered financial irregularities, the restaurant was already operational. Porter claimed all investors had been properly compensated. It wasn't until later that I learned otherwise." "How much later?" Emily pressed. Richard glanced at Ethan, then back to Emily. 3 months after opening, I received this." He reached into his desk drawer and withdrew a thick envelope, sliding it across the table to Emily. "From Daniel Porter's attorney." With shaking hands, Emily opened the envelope. Inside was a copy of a legal agreement between Daniel Porter and Richard Morgan, dated 6 years ago, just weeks after Daniel had stolen Emily's investment and broken their engagement. But beneath that was something else. A letter, written in familiar handwriting. Her handwriting. Emily stared at the document in confusion. "I never wrote to you." "Not to me," Richard clarified. "To Daniel. His attorney forwarded it as proof that you had relinquished all claims to the business." Emily scanned the letter, her confusion deepening. "I never wrote this. This isn't even my signature." "We know," Ethan said quietly. "It's a forgery." Richard nodded gravely. "When Ethan brought your situation to my attention recently, I had our legal team re-examine everything from that period. The letter is a sophisticated fake, but it is indeed a fake." Emily's mind reeled. "He forged my signature? My handwriting?" "Not just that," Richard continued. "He created an entirely fictional separation agreement, making it appear that you had willingly walked away from both the relationship and the business in exchange for a cash settlement. There was no settlement." Emily's voice shook with anger. "He left me pregnant and penniless, which is why I'm prepared to make this right." Richard withdrew another document from his desk. "This is a certified check for the full amount of your original investment, plus interest for 6 years, plus damages." Emily stared at the check, the amount making her dizzy. "I don't understand. Why now? Why not years ago?" "Because I didn't know." Richard's expression showed genuine regret. Porter's documentation appeared legitimate. By the time I realized he was mismanaging the restaurant, I had already withdrawn my support. I never knew there was an injured party who hadn't been compensated. Emily looked between father and son, struggling to process everything. "And you?" she asked Ethan. "When did you discover all this?" Ethan met her gaze steadily. "I found the files in my father's archives when I was researching Porter after you told me your story. I confronted my father, and we began the process of making this right. But I should have told you immediately. That was my mistake, and I'm deeply sorry." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. Yet questions still lingered. "Why did you really bring me to San Francisco, Ethan? Was it to show me this?" "Partly," he admitted. "I wanted you to hear the full story from my father, to see the evidence yourself. But more than that, I wanted you to reclaim this city, to face the past and move beyond it, with me." Emily stood, needing space to think. She walked to the window, gazing out at the city that had once held all her dreams, then shattered them. Now, it seemed, the pieces were being offered back to her. Her career through Ethan's faith in her abilities, her financial security through this unexpected restitution, and perhaps even her heart through the love that had grown between them. But was it enough? Could she truly trust again after discovering this connection between the Morgans and her painful past? "Emily," Ethan said softly, coming to stand beside her. "I understand if this changes things between us. But please believe that my feelings for you and Jake have never been about guilt or obligation. They're about who you are, your strength, your integrity, your incredible heart." She turned to face him, searching his eyes for any hint of deception. Instead, she found only the same steadfast devotion he'd shown since that first unlikely day in the break room. "I need you to promise me something," she said finally. "Anything. No more secrets. No matter how painful or complicated or well-intentioned, complete honesty between us." Ethan nodded without hesitation. "I promise. No more secrets." Emily took a deep breath, then turned to Richard. "Thank you for this." She indicated the check. "But there's something I need to know. The restaurant closing, was that your doing or Ethan's?" Richard smiled slightly. "A joint effort, though I believe my son was rather more zealous in his approach than I might have been. It seems he takes matters concerning you quite personally." Emily glanced at Ethan, who had the grace to look slightly abashed. "You could say that." For the first time since the revelations began, Emily felt a smile tugging at her lips. "I suppose I can't fault your methods. The results speak for themselves. Does this mean?" Ethan left the question hanging, hope evident in his voice. "It means we still have a lot to talk about," Emily replied honestly. "But yes, I think we can find our way forward." The Morgan San Francisco opened to rave reviews, with special mention of the innovative wine program developed by Emily Brooks, a rising star in the culinary world, whose sophisticated palate and inventive pairings elevate the dining experience to extraordinary heights. Emily saved the review, tucking it away in the growing collection of mementos from this new chapter of her life. 6 months had passed since the revelations in San Francisco, months filled with honest conversations, careful rebuilding of trust, and a deepening of the bond between her and Ethan. The check from Richard Morgan remained undeposited. Emily had established a trust for Jake's education instead, refusing to touch the money herself. "My career is my own now," she'd told Ethan. "I don't need reparations to succeed." Her independence had only deepened Ethan's respect for her, though he occasionally teased her about her stubborn pride. "It's not pride," she would counter. "It's self-respect, something I had to relearn after Daniel." On a crisp autumn evening, Emily stood in Ethan's penthouse, making final preparations for Jake's 7th birthday party. The guest list included his entire class, several children of restaurant staff, and even Richard Morgan, who had become an unexpectedly doting grandfather figure to Jake. "Need any help?" Ethan asked, emerging from his home office where he'd been finalizing plans for their newest location. "I think we're all set." Emily surveyed the dinosaur-themed decorations with satisfaction. "Though I'm still not sure how you managed to get an actual paleontologist to come speak to a group of 7-year-olds. Ethan grinned, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "I have connections, and I happen to know a certain birthday boy who's obsessed with fossils." Emily leaned back against him, savoring the solid warmth of his presence. "He adores you, you know. The feeling is entirely mutual. Ethan pressed a kiss to her temple. Both of you have completely upended my carefully ordered life, and I couldn't be happier about it. Emily turned in his arms, studying his face. The face that had once seemed so intimidating and was now as familiar and beloved as her own reflection. We've come a long way from that break room confrontation. Best day of my life, Ethan said seriously. Finding you and Jake hiding out with those coloring books. Even though you terrified us both. Even though. He reached into his pocket. Which brings me to something I've been wanting to ask you. Emily's breath caught as he withdrew a small velvet box. Ethan, I had a whole speech prepared, he said, his voice suddenly husky with emotion. About how you and Jake have transformed my life. How I never knew what was missing until I found you both. But standing here now, all I can think to say is that I love you, Emily Brooks. Completely, and without reservation. Will you marry me? He opened the box to reveal a stunning ring, elegant and understated, exactly her taste. Emily looked from the ring to the man holding it, this man who had seen her at her most vulnerable and her most strong, who had respected her independence while offering unwavering support, who had become not just a partner to her, but a father figure to her son. Yes, she said simply, tears of joy welling in her eyes. Yes, I'll marry you. As Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into a kiss that promised a lifetime of love, Emily felt the last pieces of her heart truly heal. The journey hadn't been easy, from single mother struggling to make ends meet to successful wine director and now, soon-to-be wife of a man who loved her completely for exactly who she was. Just then Jake burst into the room, his eyes widening at the scene before him. Mom, Mr. Ethan, are you getting married? Ethan crouched down to Jake's level, his expression serious. That depends, buddy. I've asked your mom and she said yes, but I think we need your approval too. How would you feel about me becoming part of your family officially? Jake considered this with all the gravity a 7-year-old could muster. Does this mean I can call you Dad? The question brought fresh tears to Emily's eyes. Jake had never called Daniel Dad, had never known what it meant to have a father's love and protection. Ethan's voice was thick with emotion as he replied, I would be honored, Jake, more than you can know. Jake launched himself into Ethan's arms, nearly knocking him over with the force of his enthusiasm. Then yes. Can we tell everyone at my party? Emily laughed, joining their embrace. It's your birthday, sweetie. You can make the announcement. As Jake raced off to practice what he would say to his friends, Ethan pulled Emily close again. Thank you, he whispered against her hair. For what? For taking a chance on me. For believing in us, even when it wasn't easy. Emily smiled up at him, her heart full to bursting. Some risks are worth taking. And as they stood together in the home they now shared, planning a future that once would have seemed impossible, Emily knew with absolute certainty that this particular risk, opening her heart to Ethan Morgan, had been the best decision of her life. The end.